Hi, in our previous session, we had discussed a simple range lying within a single column. We'll try to build on that. In this particular session, we'll be covering various properties and methods that will be useful in manipulating ranges and also dealing with dynamic ranges. Before that, let's revisit what we had learned. So a range is either a single cell or collection of multiple cells. Now this collection of multiple cells can either be a contiguous range or non-contiguous. By contiguous, I mean that the cells of the range are within a fixed rectangular boundary, within a single rectangular block, say with X number of rows and Y number of columns. Whereas in case of non-contiguous range, you do not have any particular shape. If you see visually, you can see have blocks of cells widely spread across the worksheet. So it does not conform to a single rectangular block. In most of the cases that we'll be dealing with will be contiguous ranges, and hence we'll be limiting the scope of our discussion in this session to contiguous ranges only. Earlier I also said that we'll be covering properties and methods that will be helpful in manipulating ranges. Before that, I need to be clear on what I mean by manipulating ranges. By manipulating ranges, I mean that a range being a collection of multiple cells, we must have the capability to navigate to any cell within this range. For instance, you may want to run a for loop where we'll iterate through every cell of the range and apply some condition, and based on that condition get some output. So it can be like counting the number of cells in the range with values greater than 100, or the number of cells containing a particular text string. So the condition can be anything. But the moot point is we must have the capability to navigate to any particular cell of this range. Apart from this navigational capability, we must also be able to resize the dimensions of our range. If earlier the range had dimensions of 5 number of rows and 1 column, we must be able to resize it to, let's say, 10 number of rows and 2 columns. And why limit ourselves to resizing? Instead of resizing, we may consider offsetting or shifting the range location. In our previous session, the range location was D5 to D18. We may consider it shifting by 1 column so that the new range location becomes E5 to E18. So all these capabilities of offsetting, of resizing, and of being able to navigate to any particular cell of the range is what would majorly constitute manipulating ranges. Apart from this, there are certain read-only properties which would provide informational attributes such as the number of rows, the number of columns within the range object, the address of the range, or the name of the parent worksheet of the range. These informational attributes can be very useful and serve as inputs in other parts of our code. The importance of these read-only properties will become apparent when you are dealing with dynamic ranges. While in the previous example, we had considered a simple static range with a predefined first cell and a predefined last cell. But going forward, you will be dealing with dynamic ranges. And over there, these read-only properties will be very useful. How you do it is you pass the reference of a dynamic range object to a variable name, and using that variable that is of the type range, you have access to the read-only properties such as range.rows.count, range.columns.count that will return the number of rows and the number of columns in the range object, or range.worksheet.name, which will give you the name of the worksheet in which the range is present, or range.address that will return the address of the range object. So we'll revisit these properties and these methods. We'll revisit them line by line by writing the codes within a macro. So if I am to summarize what we are going to cover in this session, we would be covering the properties range.cells, the methods range.offset and Range.Resize. We'll try multiple variations by passing on different arguments to these methods, and to extend the utility of these methods and properties, we'll take the help of various read-only properties such as range.rows.count, range.columns.count, range.worksheet.name, and range.address. So with this, let's get back to the worksheet and the VBA editor. Let's get started. So we are in the worksheet named Sheet 3. We'll be considering the same range D5 to D18 as we had considered in our previous session. We also have the VBA editor open, wherein we are currently in module 2. We have written a new macro subroutine named useful_range_properties_methods. So we'll be demonstrating the use of this property range.cells and the methods range.offset and range.resize. We'll also be trying multiple variations of using this property and methods by also using the read-only properties such as range.rows.count, range.columns.count, range.worksheet.name, and range.address. Now we shall declare a range variable, let's say RR1, dim RR1 as range. To this range variable RR1, we shall assign the range D5 to D18 of the worksheet name Sheet 3. Note that this Sheet 3 is the name of the worksheet, and it also appears in the VBA editor within the parentheses. So, and further, we shall be applying the properties range.cells and the methods range.offset and range.resize onto this variable RR1, and the output will also be a range. To assign that output, we need another range variable. So let's dim RR2 as range. So currently we have two variables, that is RR1 and RR2 of the type range. Let's assign the range D5 to D18 to the variable RR1. We had discussed the syntax previously in the previous session. So set RR1 equal to this workbook dot worksheets. We'll pass the name of the worksheet, which is Sheet 3, also appearing over there in the VBA editor, Sheet 3. Dot range. The first cell is D5 and the last cell is D18. Let's select the range assigned to the variable RR1. So RR1 dot select. Let's change the active cell range. Let us select B2. So range B2 dot select. So this was the method that we had discussed in our previous session. I'd like to do a minor tweak onto this particular syntax. So let me copy this. So why the reason for minor tweak is because the name of the worksheet that we had entered in this particular syntax, this is something that can be changed by the user. For instance, I can change this particular sheet 3 that is appearing in the Excel window. I can change it to, let's say, sheet_3, and let us see what happens. So as you can see, the name of the worksheet has changed in the Excel window, and the same name of the worksheet is getting reflected within the parentheses in the VBA editor. So now this line of code wherein I have written set rr1 equal to this workbook.worksheets, and within the parentheses sheet3.range d5 d18, this line of code will not work, because now for this line of code to work, there has to be a worksheet named sheet3, and over here we cannot find any. So this will return an error the moment you change the worksheet name that is getting displayed over here. But there is a solution. If we notice, if we are observant, we can see that the string sheet3 prior to the parenthesis in the VBA editor remains unchanged. And this is something that is inviolable. This is the sheet code name, whose sanctity is inviolable, which the user cannot change, and the name cannot be tampered to it. And this is actually a worksheet object. Sheet 3 represents the worksheet, this particular worksheet, and sheet_3, that is the name that is getting displayed to us in the Excel window view. It is actually the value of the names property of the worksheet object sheet 3. So if at any moment of time I want to know what is the name of the worksheet of this particular worksheet, whose internal sheet code name is sheet 3, then I can access this particular name using the names property of the worksheet object. So the tweak that I'll be doing is entering sheet .name in this particular syntax, which will give us access to the current name of the worksheet. Let me also change in the first assignment of the range. Let me change the name of the worksheet, which is sheet_3 right now. Let me run these lines of code and let us see if they are working as expected. So let me step into this macro and run each of the lines of code. So right now we are at the very first method of assigning the range to the range variable. RR1 is selected. Let me change the active cell. Now we are about to execute the second way of assigning the range object to a range variable, and we shall be using sheet code name sheet3 and accessing the name of the worksheet object using the .name property. So let me execute this line of code and let me select the range RR1. As you can see, this has been correctly selected. So both these lines, both these ways of assigning a range to a variable works. However, the moment you change this particular sheet name that is getting displayed in the Excel window, our first method of assigning the range to the variable, it fails. So I would in fact recommend to go ahead with this second method and this would be the revised method of assigning a range to a range variable. So let me comment out the first three lines of code. So now let's proceed ahead with the Range.Cells property. So as discussed earlier in this session, we can use the Range.Cells property to navigate to any particular cell of the range object. To add on to it further, we can in fact move to any particular cell in the worksheet even by using the Range.Cells property. So let us understand the same by using the range object RR1. Let us say you want to select the very first cell, and let us assign this very first cell by using the Range.Cells property. Let us assign this very first cell to the range variable RR2. So let's go back to the VB editor and use the set statement. So set RR2 equal to RR1 dot cells. Now you can see there are two arguments that requires to be entered, which is the row index and the column index. In this particular case, it will be 1 and the column index will be 1 as well. Let us select the range location which has been assigned to the variable RR2. So let us enter RR2 dot select. Let's change the active cell to the range location B2. So range B2 dot select. Now let us understand what has happened. So to select the very first cell of this range object RR1, we have entered the row index argument as 1 and the column index argument as 1. So what is happening is that this particular row, which contains the first cell of the range object RR1, this particular row will have the index as 1 whenever you are using the Range.Cells property, whenever you are using RR1.cells property. And this particular column, which contains the first column and the first cell of the range object RR1, will have the column index as 1. So if you are trying to reference any particular cell in this column, if you are trying to reference any particular cell of this column using RR1.cells property, the column index argument shall be 1. Whereas if the cell were to be in this particular column and you want to refer this particular cell using RR1.cells property, you have to enter the column index argument as 2, and the corresponding row index argument shall be relative to the location, to the relative to the row index of the first cell of the range object RR1. So let's say we want to select this particular cell. As you can see, the row index of this particular cell with respect to the first cell of the range object RR1 will be 5, and the column index shall be 1. So let us
write the lines of code to select. So let me enter the row index as 5 and column index shall be 1. Let me change the active cell. So before running the lines of code, we want to first select this particular cell using the row index and the column index as 1, 1, and we also want to select this particular cell for which we'll enter the row index as 5 within the rr1.cells property and the column index as 1. So let us execute these lines of code by running our macro. So right now we are at this location. So the active cell has changed. Now I am expecting the very first cell of the range RR1 to be selected. So it has got selected. Active cell has changed. Now I expect this particular cell to be assigned to RR2. Let's select RR2, and so it has been selected. Now let us change the active cell again. So our understanding of the row index and the column index is correct. Now let's say we want to select the very last cell of this particular range object RR1, and let us say this is a dynamic range. In that case, I can use the read-only properties range.rows.count as the row index argument. So let us do the same. Let's select this particular line of code and paste it over here. And let me enter the row index argument as rr1.rows.count. So let us run our code again. Let me just shift the toggle breakpoint from here to this particular location so that we can directly start running from here onwards. So let's reset the code and let's run our macro. So I'm at this location, and let me assign the last cell of this particular range object using rr1.rows.count. So let me execute this assignment statement, and now we'll be selecting the range location assigned to the range variable rr2. And so it is, so it has got selected. This is in line with our expectations. Let me just do one final tweak to this. Let's copy these lines of code. Let me also shift the toggle breakpoint from here to this particular location. And now, building on to our previous code, I'll be only changing the column index argument in the Range.Cells property. So let me enter rr1.columns.count. It's pretty apparent rr1.columns.count will be 1 because there is only one column in the range object rr1. And since we have already selected this particular cell using our code, let me select this particular cell location instead using rr1.cells property. To do that, let us add 1 to the rr1.columns.count so that the column index that we are interested in is 2. So currently, if you see this particular line of code, the row index is rr1.rows.count, which means that this particular row index is of our interest, and the column index is rr1.columns.count plus 1, which means the column index is 2, which means this is the column index of our interest. So this particular column index and this particular row index and the intersection will be assigned. So this particular cell location will be assigned to the variable RR2 via this line of code. So let us execute this line of code and let us verify whether our understanding has been correct or not. So let me reset our code and let me rerun our macro. So right now we are at this particular line. Let me execute this. The active cell has been changed. Now I look forward to the assignment of our desired cell location to RR2. Now the range location assigned to RR2 will get selected, and so it is. It has got selected. So to briefly summarize, the Range.Cells property takes in two arguments. First is the row index argument and second is the column index argument. And in fact, every cell in the worksheet can be referenced using the Range.Cells property. Only you need to be careful about the row index argument and the column index argument, which will derive their identity related to the very first cell of the range object onto which you are using the .cells property. And lastly, we can also use the range.rows.count and range.columns.count. We can add numbers to them and feed them as inputs to the Range.Cells property. So with this understanding, we'll move on to our next topic, which will be the Range.Offset method. So using the Range.Offset method, we can offset a particular range object by a specified number of rows and a specified number of columns. So what does that mean? That means that a particular range location which has been assigned to a particular range object, so that particular range location will get offsetted by a specified number of rows and a specified number of columns. Let us understand that with the context of the range variable RR1 to which the range location D5 to D18 of the worksheet named sheet_3 has been assigned. So if we were to offset this particular range location by one number of columns and assign that particular range location, assign this new location to the range variable RR2. Let's do that using the Range.Offset method. So let us use the set statement. So set RR2 equal to RR1 dot offset. Here are two arguments that we need to enter. First one is the row offset, which means the number of rows by which you want to offset the range location. And in our particular case, we do not want to offset by any number of rows, so we'll enter 0 as the row offset argument. For the column offset argument, we'll enter one column, so 1 will be the column offset argument. Another thing to note is that VBA allows you to omit a particular argument in case you do not want any offset along that particular axis, which is to say, in this particular case, we do not want any offset to happen along the row axis. So we can choose to omit this argument as well. So let us do that. Let us copy this code and enter it over here and omit the row offset argument. We shall be running both these lines of code to verify whether our understanding is correct or not. Let me also copy these two lines of code, enter it over here and re-enter it over here. Let me insert a toggle breakpoint so that we can directly resume from here when we'll be running the macro. Let me reset the code and let me run our macro. So right now we are at this location. Active cell has changed to B2. Now we'll be assigning the particular range location using row offset argument as 0 and the column offset argument as 1. RR2 has been assigned a range location. Let us select RR2. And so it is, this particular range location has been selected as expected. Let us move on to the next line of code where we had omitted the row offset argument. Let us execute this line of code. Now we'll be selecting the range location assigned to the variable RR2. And so it is. So as expected, both these methods of entering arguments to the row offset and the column offset work. Important point to note is the arguments that we had entered in row offset and column offset. They can be positive, they can be 0, and they can be negative as well. So whenever we are entering a negative offset argument, what does that mean? Let us run a line of code with let's say -1 as the column offset argument. Let us shift the toggle breakpoint and insert the toggle breakpoint over here. So our understanding is that since the column offset is -1, the direction of offsetting will get reversed and it will be towards the left. So if since RR1 is this particular range location, and if I offset it by 1 column and enter the column offset argument as 1, it is shifting towards the right. But if I enter as -1, I expect it to shift towards the left, so that the new range location expected is this one, which is C5 to C18. Let us check via our macro if this is indeed the case. Let me run our macro. And so that's it. So yeah, our understanding is correct in this case. One final pointer regarding Range.Offset. Over here, over these few lines of code, we had applied the Range.Offset in over this entire range object. If we want, we can apply this Range.Offset method at the cell level as well. For instance, in certain cases, we might always want to move on to the very first cell of a range object and offset it by a particular number of columns. Let us say we want to offset the first cell by 1 column. So in that case, you just the code doesn't vary much. You will use the .cells property over the range object RR1. So I shall only insert cells 1, 1. And so this line of code is like, set rr2 equal to rr1.cells 1 comma 1 dot offset. The row offset argument is I have omitted it, and the column offset is 1, and we expect this particular cell to get selected and assigned to the variable rr2. Let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here, and let us run our macro. So we'll be assigning this particular range location to the variable rr2. Let us do the same, and yes, it is indeed the case. So the pointers to take away regarding Range.Offset is Range.Offset property. Range.Offset method requires two arguments, row offset and column offset, and each of those arguments can be positive, negative, and it can be 0, provided this is valid within the framework of the worksheet. And we can also apply the offset property at the cell level by adding dot offset to range.cells. So with that, we shall move on to our next method, which is the range.resize. So using the Range.Resize method, we can change the number of rows and the number of columns that a particular range object or a variable refers to. It is basically resizing a range variable. Let us understand that in the context of the range variable rr1, to which we have assigned the range location D5 to D18 in the worksheet titled sheet_3. Now, if I were to resize this range variable rr1 to have 4 number of rows and let us say 3 number of columns, the resized range output that is expected shall be this, wherein I have 4 number of rows and 3 number of columns. And this resizing is happening with the very first cell of the range object being considered as the base. So any resizing is happening, any expansion that is happening is starting from this very first cell of the range variable rr1. So every time you're adding a row, the expansion is happening along this direction, or the contraction is happening along this direction till you can reduce it no further, that is, till you are reduced to the very first cell of the range object. Similarly, every time you're increasing or you're resizing the number of columns, the expansion will be happening along this direction. So let us consider the instance of resizing the variable rr1 to have 4 number of rows and 3 number of columns, and let us assign the resized range to the variable rr2. So let us use the set statement, set rr2 equal to rr1 dot resize, wherein I have to enter 2 arguments. The first one is the row size and the second one is the column size. In our particular use case, the row size will be 4 and the column size will be 3. Let me copy these 2 lines of code and paste it over here. Let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here, and now we are ready to run our macro and verify whether our understanding of resizing a range object is correct or not. So let us run our macro. So right now we are at this location. The active cell has changed, and now we are about to apply the .resize method onto the range object RR1. So let me execute this line. Now we'll be selecting the range location that has been assigned to the range variable RR2. So here it is. We were able to select and assign this particular range location to the variable RR2 using the .resize method on the range variable RR1. Let me clean the code. Let me remove this toggle breakpoint. So now we are so we had entered in this particular line of code, when we had applied the .resize method on a range object, we had entered the row size as 4 and the column size as 3. Now, is it possible to enter 0 as the row size argument? Although it does not make sense. Let us see how the VBA editor reacts to it. So let me copy these lines of code and let me enter the row size as 0. Let us also try to see if the row size and the column size arguments can be negative numbers or not. So let me copy these lines of code and paste it over here, and now I will change the row size argument in the .resize method as let us say -1 to keep things simple. Let me insert the toggle breakpoint over here so that we can directly resume from this line onwards. Now, so what exactly I am trying to do? I am trying to check if the row size or the column size arguments can be 0 or if it can be negative. So let us run our macro and verify whether that is possible or not. So we are about to execute this line. So it returns an error. There is a runtime error 1004. So it indeed does not make sense, and same has been returned by the VBA code. So let us close this tab and let me comment it out, because this will otherwise return an error. Now we shall verify whether -1 as an input works with the .resize method or not. So let us rerun our macro. So we are currently at this line. Active cell has changed. Now we are about to execute the .resize method with a negative number as the row size argument. Again, so it is. So this returns an error as well. So this is an important point to note, that the .resize method onto a range object accepts only positive numbers as the valid arguments. So let me end this error tab. Let me clean the code by removing this toggle breakpoint, and let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here. Let me in fact comment out these lines of code, since they will return an error, and let me insert a toggle breakpoint over here. Now there will be certain situations. Let us consider another situation where we have this particular range variable RR1 and we want to resize it to have 2 more additional rows. So I want a new range object that has 2 additional rows vis-a-vis the range variable RR1. So this is a very interesting use case where I can use the read-only properties range.rows.count. So let me show you how. So let us enter the row size argument as rr1 dot rows dot count plus 2, and let me enter the column size argument as rr1 dot columns dot count. So before running our code, let us understand what exactly should happen. So since the row size argument is rr1.rows.count plus 2, and we know that the base from where the resizing will start is the very first cell of the range object rr1. So from this cell onwards, the expansion along the row axis will start, and the expansion along the column axis will start from this cell along this direction. So since the row size argument is rr1.rows.count, so right now we are over here, plus 2, which implies 2 additional rows, so we are over here. And since columns.count is the value is 1 for rr1 range object, so there is no additional expansion along the columns direction. So this is our expected range output from this particular line of code. Let us run our macro and verify if it is indeed the case. So let me clean our code and let me run the macro. So right now we are at this particular location. Let us step into our code. Now we are about to resize the range variable rr1. Now we'll be selecting the range location assigned to the variable rr2, and so it is. Our original range rr1 plus 2 additional rows have been assigned to the range variable rr2. This is a very interesting use case of using the read-only properties .rows.count and .columns.count. Let me clean our code again. Let me remove the toggle breakpoint from here and insert the toggle breakpoint over at this place, and let me reset our macro. So let's rephrase what we have learned till now. So we have learned to use the .Resize method, wherein we can enter positive integers as arguments to the row size and the column size, and we can use the read-only properties .rows.count and .columns.count. To add onto it further, till now, whenever we had applied the .Resize method, it has been to the entire range, which meant that the base for resizing has always been the very first cell of the range variable rr1. Now let's consider a case where we want the resizing of the range to happen not from the first cell but from this particular cell, whose row index with respect to the range object rr1 is 4, and the column index with respect to the range object rr1 is 1. So this is the particular location from wherein I want to start the resizing to happen, and for that I'll be using the .cells property of a range. So let us do that in the code. So let me copy these few lines of code. Since we want the resizing to start from this particular cell, which is having the row index as 4, so when I will insert the .cells over here and pass the argument 4 as the row index and the column index as 1. .resize, since we want to, let's say, resize our range starting from this particular base and have the same number of rows as the range object rr1, So let me keep rr1.rows.count as the row size argument, and the column size argument shall remain same as the rr1.columns.count. So let us run this macro and see if the assignment to RR2 is as per our expectation or not. So let us run the macro. We are at this location. Now we are about to assign to apply the .cells property followed by the .resize method. So here it is. Now the resizing of the range has happened from the fourth cell of the particular range object RR1. So this is a very interesting use case wherein I have used the .resize method on top of the .cells property onto a range object. Now this is possible because the output from applying the .cells property is a range. The output from applying the .resize method as well as the .offset method will also be a range. So we can apply these properties and methods on top of each other in succession using the dot operator. So that was a comprehensive coverage of the Range.Resize method. So now let us get ready to move on to our final topic on Range.Readonly properties. So let me clean the code. Let me remove this toggle breakpoint and let us reset our macro. So now we are in the final phase of this session. We plan to cover the properties range.row, range.column, the range.address, and the range.worksheet.name. We'll cover these read-only properties and demonstrate the use of them in conjunction with the message box. Message box is nothing but a pop-up that will display the information. So depending on the text string, the way you have entered the text string while writing the code for message box, the information will be displayed within the message box. So let us write the codes corresponding to each of these read-only properties in the context of this range RR1. So let's consider a use case in which we want the row number and the column number of the very first cell of the range RR1 to be displayed in the message box. We'll also display the address of the range location assigned to the variable RR1 and also the worksheet name that contains the range RR1. So let us proceed ahead with the message box code. Message box. So the text string argument that will enter in the message box shall be either a combination of multiple text string or the concatenation of text string and variables. So with regard to our first use case where we want to find the row number of this first cell of the range RR1, let us enter the text string as the row number of the first cell of range RR1 is, as you can see, there is not enough space to contain the entire code, so we'll spill over to the next line. For this, let us enter a space followed by an underscore character and enter. Now the next line will be in continuation to this line. They are part of the same code. So let us enter the ampersand character, which is used for concatenation of multiple text strings and variables. After the is, we also want a space character. So for that, we'll use the character code 32. So this character code 32, so this you can Google it out also, because every expression has a character code assigned to it, and you can use those character code whenever you are writing your code. So another ampersand character after this, and now we'll use the read-only property with range.row. So rr1 dot cells 1 comma 1 dot row. This will give us the row number of the very first cell of the range variable rr1. We also need a full stop character at the end, so we'll concatenate a string full stop. So this is the first message box that will display the row number of the first cell of the range rr1. In our next message box, we want to display the column number of the first cell of the range rr1. So let us change the text. Let us remove the row and insert column over here. And in this particular portion, we shall enter rr1 dot cells 1 comma 1 dot column. Now we shall have the message box where we want to display the range address. So let me copy this part of the code. Let me change the text string so that the text string becomes the address of range rr1 is, and over here over this particular portion I will change the read-only property to rr1.address. Let's move on to the next message box where we want to display the worksheet name. So let me copy and paste, and over here I will modify the text string to have the worksheet containing the range rr1. And in the particular position where I am accessing the read-only property, I will modify it as rr1 dot worksheet dot name. So note that this particular property, the not name property of a worksheet object, will give us this particular sheet name, which is displayed over here. So we are expecting sheet underscore 3 to be displayed. The same sheet name also appears in the project explorer view just besides the sheet code name. Within the parenthesis, the same sheet underscore 3 appears. Just one last message box I would like to add, in which I want to display the sheet code name of the worksheet that contains the range rr1. So let me copy and paste the code, and let me modify the text string to the sheet code name of the worksheet containing the range rr1 is. So this is the modified text. The sheet code name of the range of the worksheet containing the range rr1 is, and over here we'll just change the dot name property to dot code name, which will give us access to the sheet code name of the particular worksheet object. So with this, my message box are ready, my code is ready, and now I will run them one by one. Let me just insert a toggle breakpoint so that we can directly get started from this location. So let's run our macro. Right now I'm in this position. Let me execute this particular line. Now my first message box displaying the row number of the first cell of the range RR1 is going to be displayed. So let us execute this line. So here it is. The row number of the first cell of the range RR1 is 5. Note that there is a space in between 5 and is. Now that is because we have inserted a character 32 for the space. Now let us execute our next message box for the column number. Column number is 4 and this is correct. Now we are expecting the address of the range RR1 to be displayed. This is D5 to D18, which is in line with our expectation. Now we are expecting the worksheet name to be displayed. Sheet_3, this is also correct. And finally, we are expecting the worksheet code name to be displayed. And this is sheet 3. So our message box in conjunction with the read-only properties .row, .column, .address and .worksheet.name has worked as expected. So with this, we are at the end of this particular session. Let us do a quick recap of what we have learned in this session. We have learned how to manipulate ranges using the property Range.Cells and the method Range.Offset and the method Range.Resize. We have also come to know that the output of using either of this property and method is a range output, which implies that we can use this property and methods on top of each other in succession using the dot operator. We have also learned about the read-only properties such as range.rows.count, range.columns.count, range.row, range.column, range.worksheet.name, range.worksheet.codename, and range.address. Now these particular read-only properties provide informational attributes about a range, and they have served as inputs to the property Range.Cells and the method Range.Offset and Range.Resize. And using these read-only properties, we have been able to harness the full power of manipulating ranges. We will, as we advance into advanced topics where we'll be automating a sequence of operations by writing our code, these particular properties and methods will become very, very useful. We will be dealing with multiple range objects, we'll be filtering them, we'll be sorting them, probably we'll be creating charts also. So we'll be doing multiple activities using these read-only properties along with these properties and methods to manipulate ranges. We also came to know about the message box. So with this understanding of what we have covered in this particular session, we look forward to learn about dynamic ranges in our next session. Till that time, keep on learning, keep on revising the concepts, keep on writing the code. Until then, goodbye.